But you're a welcome guest and lecturer at Forvm Romanvm here. You're a friend of the University of Belgrade Faculty of Law and a friend of our Professor Abramovich. All of your lectures and simulations of the trials of Hercules, Orestes, and Anaxagoras are well remembered. In December 2020, we had the opportunity to listen to your lecture, A Murderous Supreme Court of Public Passion, Tainted Prosecutions of Athens, of Alcibiades, and 1326. We look forward to hearing from you again this week, and we are glad that this is the fourth time that all those who are interested will be able to see and imagine a trial in ancient Athens. What inspired you to present the world of ancient Greece to students through trial simulations? Not just ancient Greece, ancient Rome. What students learn the most during such presentations?
The principle of what I call impersonation exercise has been a principle of my pedagogy, my method of teaching, almost forever. I was brought to the University of Denver in 1971 to participate in what we called a block course on classical Athens. The block course meant that for one academic quarter, we were on a trimester or quarter calendar, but for one quarter of the year, a student would do nothing but interdisciplinary study of classical Athens. There was one on Elizabethan England. There was one on Song China. There was another one on Gupta India, I think. Classical Athens involved two of us, because in those early years, before I was the only classicist, there were two. So two classicists, a historian, an art historian, a philosopher, a religious studies person, and someone from theater. So this team would lecture to the whole group, and we could have 60 or 70 students, to lecture to the whole group, but then we would break out into small classes topically. So I did, my own topic was tragedy. But for the general sessions, we planned a variety of events, not just lectures. I could lecture, and I had become much better as a lecturer in the meantime. I wasn't very good when I started. But I also had the idea right away, and it's nothing that I had experienced in my undergraduate or graduate education, that a good way of getting students to think their way into the heads of the ancient Athenians we were studying was to make them ancient Athenians in a real life situation. And so I think it was in the very first year. If it wasn't in the first year, it was in the second year, third year, fourth year. The thing was offered 4 different times before they ran out of money to support it, and some of the faculty were released. If it wasn't, but I think it was already in the first time, we had a trial of Anaxagoras. And we did one of those for Forvm Romanvm. I think that was the one immediately before the plague. So we did Anaxagoras, and then we had the plague. There was going to be a trial of Alcibiades a year ago, but instead the political trials Zoomed lecture took its place a year ago. Anaxagoras, the atheistic philosopher, scientist, was someone we were trying to understand. We're trying to understand, in the lecture series, we're trying to understand his place in Athenian intellectual history, but also in Athenian political history. The Athenians were proud of paresia, of free speech, but some kinds of speech were not protected. And speech, and this was also understood to include writing, speech and writing that was unholy was subject to prosecution, and pretty serious capital prosecution. So all of this was understood. There was free thinking, but then there were limits on free thinking by people who were basically very pious, superstitious, fearful that if one person in the community seriously offends the gods, the whole community can suffer for it. Students were learning about ancient science and about pre-Socratic philosophy, and so we had from someone in philosophy a lecture that was partly about Anaxagoras. And I knew that was going to happen. So when we planned the course, I said, I think it would be a great idea, because I had studied pre-Socratics with David Furley at Princeton and knew something about it, that we should have a trial of one of the most outrageous of pre-Socratics. And so we did. We had some I think in this case, the faculty were the prosecutor and the defense. I forget whether I was the prosecutor. I think Don Hughes was the prosecutor, and I think I was the defense leader of the defense. So we didn't get undergraduate students. These are first-year students. These are 17, 18-year-old kids. We didn't get the students to do the prosecution or the defense, but we did have other faculty, because the faculty, so far as possible, all of them attend everybody else's lectures. So we had arguments for killing this guy. He is outraging the gods, and we're all in danger. Or where is your respect for free speech? And in fact, he is not attacking the gods. He says nothing about the gods, and back and forth. And then we had the students vote, and we had them vote in two stages. Just like the trial of Socrates that Plato reports in the Apology. There was a first stage to find Anaxagoras guilty or not guilty. He committed injustice, edike or uk edike. The first vote was narrowly to condemn him. So, second stage is what shall we give as a penalty? And here, and this makes me think that I was probably a prosecutor, or I put this in the mind of one of my colleagues, who would say that Anaxagoras is really a subject of the king of Persia. His city, Clazomenae, was Persian when he was born, so he was really born a Persian. Let's impale him. It's a good Persian punishment. And then the other side said, well, let's exile him. And the vote was not to commit that atrocious punishment, but to just to exile him. But all this happened in 1972, and we did this in future years, and we did something like that when we did a Roman course, a parallel Roman course. We alternated the Athens and Rome, just this whole name, Rome. But it was ancient Rome, time of the last civil wars and the very beginning of the empire. We did something like that in the Roman course as well. And I've been using impersonation exercises in classes that are appropriate on and off for all the time that I've been at the University of Denver. I do, of course, Athens and Beijing, two worlds are one. And we had the students there to be disciples of Confucius. Confucius has died, but Confucius' disciples were very much contentious among themselves, and they took very different interpretations of what Confucius meant, every bit as much as Christians disagree about what Jesus meant. So I had different schools. So they were all ancient Chinese, and they all knew Confucius, but they were going to take different approaches to what Confucius meant to them, and they were probably going to establish different schools. Then I won't give you all of them, there were several of them, but one of them was different French people. On the day that Louis XVI was guillotined. And so people are gathered, people who hated the monarchy, people who loved the monarchy, people who are religious and think that the monarch is protected by God, and people who are atheists. people who have a financial interest in the success of the revolution, people who have suffered financially because of the revolution. Each of the 18 students in the class had a particular identity and was asked to speak from that person's perspective, not whether they believed Louis XVI should have been killed or should have been just thrown out of the country. But this is going to happen. He is going to lose his head any minute now. We were watching. We see the king is going to come up on the platform, so everybody can see. Big crowd gathered, and so we had the crowd talking about what's about to happen. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Are you afraid of the consequence without knowing exactly what it is? But if you can take the head off a king, nobody should be too sure to keep his or her head, because they started executing women soon after. In fact, I forget when the first woman was guillotined. It may not have been until a little bit later in the year 1793, of course. So impersonation exercise. I love impersonation exercise. Some of the students love them. Some of the students hate them and ask why we do this. And it's exactly the students who ask why we do this who must try this kind of thing.